The Dragon King realized that he was getting stronger each time and decided that it was time to move out. He ordered the Transfiguration Lord to stay here and prepare for the attack. The Dragon King didn't want to let the King of Darkness win. Even the ordinary soldiers who were on the ground fought valiantly. They saw the terrifying monsters in front of them but spared no ammunition and fired as much as possible. If they hit the appearance of the enemies, they could at least slow them down. By no means would they wait for the hunters to come and save them. As one of the monsters began to approach the regular soldiers, Thomas Andre appeared and with one blow sent the large monster back where it came from. He was glad that he had not seen such monsters for a long time because just recently they were only found in dungeons. The scavengers were ready to fight, although Thomas Andre realized that there were a lot of them. But that was all right. At the same moment, someone else appeared, emerging from the shadows of the monsters, and began to tell Thomas Andre that this was the same vessel that had lost to the Beast Lords. He was the Steel Body Lord, monarch of the monstrous humanoids. In a split second, Thomas's life could be cut short by his fault. The monarch asked Thomas if he still wanted to fight, but Thomas didn't understand what he was saying. He didn't care at all, for it was not his style to think long. At that moment, a huge shadow appeared behind Thomas, from which the shadow soldiers started to come out. The first one who came out was the Baron Commander-in-Chief, who began to tell the monarch of the humanoids that they had not seen each other for a long time. The monarch of the humanoids did not understand where the shadow army came from. Did he really say that they were hiding in the shadow of an ordinary man? He decided to quickly report it to the Dragon King, but suddenly realized that his communication channel was blocked. He turned his attention to the nearest building, where the Shadow Fang soldier was standing. The soldier used his magic to block all the communications in his sight. The humanoid monarch didn't realize that the Shadow Lord and his soldiers had orchestrated such a move. A shadow army would never do such a thing. It was more like the methods of humans. The humanoid monarch began to get angry and shouted that the Shadow Lord was not worthy of carrying the title of Lord. The commander didn't agree and began to tell him to take it back immediately. Otherwise, you might greatly regret insulting my king. These words hurt the humanoid monarch deeply. He shouted back that some pathetic soldier was standing in the monarch's way. In an instant, he turned into a huge humanoid, ready to demolish everything in his path. At the same time, Jin-Woo had already met the Dragon King and was ready for the battle that would put an end to all this torment. Jin-Woo came closer and closer to the Dragon King. The Dragon King stood there confused, wondering why the Steel Body Lord wasn't answering. Had he betrayed him, or was this just another ploy by Hunter Jin-Woo? But he didn't want to ponder any longer. At that second, flames began to appear, as the Dragon King decided to finish off Jin-Woo immediately. Huge flames flew at our hero. Jin-Woo stood there unmoving. When the flames died down in front of the Dragon King, it was seen that the flames had wiped out several kilometers. All the houses in the area were burned to the ground. But that was just the beginning. Jin-Woo was alive and now on his dragon, flying above the Dragon King. Jin-Woo sprang into action, summoning his army of shadow soldiers. In the same second, they began to fall straight toward the Dragon King. The latter raised his hand, from which powers began to appear. With them, he wanted to destroy Jin-Woo's soldiers. Meanwhile, Liu Zhigang was fighting against a huge monster. As soon as he killed the giant, he realized it was much easier to fight them than when he was at sea. He began to feel faint fluctuations of magical energy everywhere. Hundreds of thousands of hunters were now fighting countless monsters. On that side, it was like the epicenter of pain. If Liu Zhigang went closer, he would immediately be swallowed up by the wave of agony. Liu Zhigang realized that Jin-Woo had started to act and was fighting against the Dragon King with his shadow soldiers. However, the Dragon King was very strong. With one wave of his hand, he destroyed all the shadow soldiers that Jin-Woo released. It was very little to him. He didn't think that Jin-Woo had unleashed his entire army. After all, it was only a bunch of pitiful warriors. The Dragon King started to say that if Jin-Woo thought he could handle him with such a number, it was too arrogant. Suddenly, the Dragon King saw Jin-Woo running away into a portal. The Dragon King didn't want to let him escape, and with great speed rushed after him. As they both passed, the Dragon King saw a huge army of shadow soldiers in front of him, already standing and waiting. Then he realized that Jin-Woo had absorbed the warriors of the humanoid lords. While they were having fun with him, Jin-Woo's puppets had quietly infected his comrades. The Dragon King thought this wasn't a bad plan, but was prepared. The Transfiguration Lord, who stood on one addition, began to open many gates. The Dragon King began to say that Jin-Woo had counted on him being the only one to fight. However, the Dragon King intended to summon as many warriors as he wanted with the gates. He declared that Jin-Woo's plan was doomed to fail and that he had lost. Now only death awaits you. But Jin-Woo smiled and began to cancel his summoning. The Dragon King didn't understand why he was letting his warriors go. The Dragon King narrowed his eyes, sensing strange energy gathering around Jin-Woo. In that very second, the Dragon King guessed what he was going to do. After all, among all the skills that can be obtained thanks to the Reed Runestone, there is the most ferocious one. This skill puts everyone into deep despair, regardless of whether it's friend or foe. And here, even Dragon Terror would not help. Thus, all the dragons who were in the sky and all the monarchs who were on the ground began to feel a terrifying pain. The Dragon King, who was watching all this, did not understand why it increased. He thought it only affected dragons. At that very second, Jin-Woo appeared, holding the Dragon King's hand, and began to say that he was about to go with him. The Dragon King realized that Jin-Woo had planned everything just for this, and in that very second, they started to appear in a different place, the deserted island where Jin-Woo's castle was. The Dragon King couldn't understand where they appeared, but Jin-Woo started saying that they were now on the other side of the world. The Dragon King began to say that if he had as many warriors as they were there, he could easily defeat them. However, his mana reserves were not limitless, and Jin-Woo had done the right thing by bringing only him here. But suddenly, the Dragon King noticed the castle in front of him and asked whose castle it was. Jin-Woo replied that it was his castle. The look on Jin-Woo's face was funny when the Dragon King said that it was somehow small for a Shadow Lord's castle. At this moment, Jin-Woo still decided that its size should be enough to celebrate the death of the Dragon King, but the smile that appeared on the Dragon King's face was incomprehensible, and he began to say that he would see how much would be enough while his warriors were looking for him. In an instant, the Dragon King began to turn into a huge monster. He was so big that the castle was like an ordinary car in comparison. But our hero, before him, was already prepared for this battle and had already managed to summon his shadowy commanders and commanders-in-chief. Mrs. Selner, who was in the same edition, was looking out the window and began to tell that man to look, that all of America was drowning in bright flames, and the waves of magical energy were not fading. The chairman of the Bureau 8 could not come to terms with what he had recently learned. After all, if what Hunter Jin-Woo said was true, then he had no idea what they were going to do. He wasn't the only one. There were hunters from all over the world with him. No matter what rank they were, ranked ones were only slightly different from ordinary people compared to military men. They could wear armor and weapons tempered with magical energy. However, each of them was well aware that this was just a drop in the ocean. Within and without are vastly different. While one could only slay one monster, other ranks could slay 3 at once, and with ranks could slay 10. But even that wouldn't be enough. The same goes for the C-ranked. Together, they were capable of destroying thousands of monsters. However, even the highly ranked ones were not immune to death, and one day each of them would become part of the vast firmament that would shine pyramids of stars to them. One would follow the other. One soul would drift away to the heavens, followed by a ray of light in pitch darkness. What a rhythm! Their journey was full of pain and despair, for this is how hope is born. The president of the Hunters Association of Japan, at this time, began to report that Hunter Jin-Woo had managed to capture the enemy leader, and they traveled together to the uninhabited Japanese islands. But the president of the association knew that Jin-Woo had mentioned this somewhere. A few kilometers away from Japan was an uninhabited island overflowing with magical energy. If that was indeed the place he thought, then it was possible that the war could end with minimal casualties. Apparently, that's why Jin-Woo was hiding there. The subordinates started asking the president of the association if he would order a gathering of hunters. The president started to reply, "What about them? Would he want them from the rank and file or the national level? I mean, they have everything in America now, or should they send more rank and file over there?" He asked his assistant what he thought. The president of the association started telling him that because he didn't even know. Once upon a time, Hunter Jin-Woo was also still orange. So even such low-ranked hunters could become heroes who were now fighting against a huge dragon. Together with their shadow soldiers, Jin-Woo began to attack the Dragon King, thus binding his huge claws so that he couldn't spew his horrible flames. The large giants in Jin-Woo's subordinate forces fell on the Dragon King to the ground and began to restrain him. His subordinate Supreme Orma began to use his magical power and pressed the Dragon King even harder to the ground. He was chained to the ground. The two commanders-in-chief leaped into the sky and began to attack the Dragon King with tremendous power and speed. Igris, who appeared in the sky, drew his sword and started attacking him with lightning. Jin-Woo, who was watching all this, realized that everything was now going according to plan. But suddenly the Dragon King started laughing and said that it looked very funny because he loves to overwhelm his opponent with numbers. But Jin-Woo didn't know that one day this trick would work on him. And damn, it was a lot of fun for him. The Dragon King decided it was time to do the honors, though he admitted he was getting a little carried away. The Dragon King jumped up and started performing Dragon Terror, Darker Shadows. The soldiers who were on this island fell under his influence. After all, this dragon control technique had subdued Jin-Woo. As soon as it sounded, Jin-Woo could no longer control his soldiers, so he began to cancel the summoning. But as soon as he started to do so, the Dragon King opened its huge mouth and started spewing out a terrifying power in the form of fire. The huge flames flew toward our hero, who was very close. The Dragon King told him to return, calling him to repent. As the terrifying sphere of fire flew away and exploded into the sea, the Dragon King stood looking at the burned island. He spoke words of reality. Blood, screams, madness, and fear all merged together. The creatures that lived only amongst the moonlight and were willing to die for it, with a true embodiment of destruction. He was the Dragon King, the monarch of destruction. Jin-Woo, who was on Earth, realized that even magic in these lands, after the death of the King of Giants, was of no help. His immortal wars would instantly disappear before the Dragon King's fiery breath. At the same moment, the Dragon King transformed back into a human and began to descend to the ground. "Speak, Jin-Woo, so you can relax, for I have no intention of killing you yet," he said. Impressed by how far Jin-Woo was able to get away from his pursuit, though he could foil his plan at any moment, he wanted to have a conversation with him. "You, government, and Osborne have already betrayed your memories," the king continued. "But I warn you, their location is not here, but on the other side of this world, and the ruler's army is who you must pursue. An absolute being has ordered them to destroy the monarchs, and the Shadow Lord is going to help them. I'd like to finish him off first, and then deal with the rulers. However," the Dragon King paused, "after seeing you fight, I've changed my mind." He realized that Jin-Woo was nothing like the past Shadow Lord, and in this, I see a chance to defeat the ruler army. The Dragon King held out his hand and began to say, "If you want your family saved, that's not a question. I'll help, and if you want your country saved, I'll support you. But if you want me to leave this world, just ask, and I will gather my warriors and leave this place forever. You will be the master of this world, and no one will even say a word to you." The Dragon King held out his hand. "But first of all, shake my hand, and we will work together to defeat the ruler's army. Then your family, no, all the people of Earth, could have peace." The Dragon King asked, "Do you agree to such a tempting offer?" But Jin-Woo answered him, "Don't make me laugh. Do you really think I'm just a confident freak who longs to destroy you? After all, you have it written all over your face." After the Dragon King heard that, he started laughing. "It's a great pity. That was my final mercy. Now, Shadow Lord, prepare for your death." It by leaping into the air, and in that same second he summoned his dragon, barring it from attacking and flying even higher. Then the Dragon King transformed back into a huge dragon, spewing flames from its big mouth toward Jin-Woo. However, it was a miss, because Jin-Woo ordered Kaizel to drop down, and they began to fly around the Dragon King from the side. As he flew even closer, he spun with such speed that the blades in his hands began to slice through the Dragon King's neck. After that, he jumped again and flew. But soon he realized that even the dragons hadn't left a scratch on him. At the same moment, they started fighting again, and the Dragon King used his ability, enlarging his left hand to the size of a large dragon paw, which he carried toward our hero. But Jin-Woo was able to dodge. The Dragon King and Jin-Woo decided to fly a little farther away, as he sensed that the Dragon King would attack with Dragon Terror again. At that very second, the castle started to burn with horrible flames. But Kaizel reacted in time, grabbed his master by the tail, and threw him back. Jin-Woo realized that Kaizel had saved his life by doing so, for he had thrown him aside and was flying onward. By doing so, Kaizel took on the fire that the Dragon King was spewing. As soon as the flames ended, all the water near the island began to boil. The Dragon King realized that Jin-Woo would not die from such a thing because there was so much dust on the island. Jin-Woo was able to stealthily sneak up on the Dragon King and jump on his neck. Once he took a closer look at the scales, he realized they looked like Mamu. He started punching at one point with all his might. The Dragon King, knowing where his opponent was, started hitting him with his big paw. However, Jin-Woo managed to bounce to the side and summoned his shadow dragons, which pounced on the Dragon King at that very second and started biting him on his large neck. The second dragon also began to test him with its flames. The three dragons surrounded him on all sides, and our hero watched this. But soon he realized that the Dragon King was unaffected by the dragon's breath. Under the leadership of Bon, the Dragon King's attacks and defenses were incomparable to anything. No one had faced him before, and Jin-Woo wouldn't be able to overpower him the same way as he had with the other dragons. Jin-Woo began to realize that he needed power more potent than armor, capable of cracking a mountain with his bare hands. Then it came to him that he could use his armor. As soon as the Dragon King dealt with the shadow dragons, Jin-Woo began to say that he couldn't be broken by such a small thing. Suddenly, the Dragon King saw that the elevated area around Jin-Woo was accumulating dark power. He wondered what he was up to, but Jin-Woo realized that he would surround himself with a dark aura-like armor and create black armor, even bigger and stronger. The energy was so immense that everything else seemed insignificant in comparison. The Dragon King, looking at all this, realized that this was an immortal body. This was impossible for him because the Shadow Lord was originally a fragment of light. This would be his true appearance. It was incomprehensible how he could be so huge. The Dragon King realized that Jin-Woo was summoning the power of death into their reality, someone who was just a simple man not long ago. The Dragon King wondered how deep Jin-Woo's connection to the other world was. When all the dark energy accumulated near Jin-Woo, the Dragon King realized that this was the true power of the Shadow Lord that Osborne had given him. Deep within his body, a power as enticing as bottomless darkness grew. He became the Dragon King. When the dark energy glowing around Jin-Woo approached him, the Dragon King realized Jin-Woo had spent a lot of time on the brink of life and death. The Dragon King realized the reason why Osborne, a past Shadow Lord, decided to pass his power to a mere human. This man had constantly fought with his own shadow before receiving such power. There was definitely a price to pay for this man's life, and the Dragon King decided to kill him now because he had proven to be too dangerous. At the flame that the Dragon King once again spewed out, Jin-Woo was able to block it with his dark energy. He responded with a massive roll of thunder. They met, and now this battle was about to end. But who would be able to win? That was what they were now determined to find out. As soon as they collided, the energies of flame and darkness erupted in different directions, like a tsunami. The two terrifying forces glared at one another. The Dragon King swung his huge paw, preparing to strike Jin-Woo, who was in his armor in berserk mode. But Jin-Woo was able to parry his strike and retaliated with a punch to his big muzzle. As soon as they leaped into the sky, the Dragon King grabbed him with his big teeth and started throwing him in different directions. Jin-Woo flew off and fell to the ground, motionless. But suddenly he opened his eyes and saw a huge flame flying at him, exhaled by the Dragon King himself. As the flames engulfed the entire island, most of the flames missed Jin-Woo. He managed to cut off one arm, but it turned out that it was only armor. In his other hand, a dark sword appeared, which he began to use to fight the Dragon King. Thus he became so strong that dark energy and flames started flying in different directions. The Dragon King cried out in pain, but then swung his big tail and hit Jin-Woo, who flew off to the side. The Dragon King started flying upwards toward the mountains and huge fireballs appeared around him. They immediately started attacking the entire island as well as the place where Jin-Woo was. When the dust settled after the battle, dark energy flew from the island in response, severing one of the Dragon King's wings. Following the first clot of dark energy, the rest flew, developing into a barrage. As the dark energy clots flew toward the Dragon King, he spewed flames. It all collided, and a huge explosion began to cover the entire island. Waves enveloped the island and flowed in different directions. As the dust began to settle, Jin-Woo's armor started to disintegrate. Eventually, he fell out of that armor and collapsed to the ground. He sighed and realized that it must be hard to maintain such an armor. It used up too much magical energy. The Dragon King started to say that Anna should give him another chance, and before it was too late, he should join him and become a Shadow Lord. Then maybe the king would spare him, but the armor that was still on Jin-Woo's body began to reform. Jin-Woo replied to the Dragon King that he wasn't interested in cooperating with monsters like him. The Dragon King thought this was too rude and began to pull out his huge sword with his hand. As soon as their eyes met, they shifted and began to fight in their almost human forms. Their blades clashed, making very loud noises. The Dragon King began to say that there would be no mercy for Jin-Woo. He would turn into ashes, along with everything he held dear. Your family and friends that you're so desperate to protect will die. You can fight all you want, but even as King of the Dead, you're still a man who fears death itself. If you want to experience the power of the flames that will burn you to the ground, then know that even the super heavens are powerless before me. Soon the whole world will turn to ashes and your pathetic dreams into illusions. Surely you must have realized what Osborne's power is. The endless cries of suffering of people from all over the world. This is war, the song of the army of destruction, summarizing the existence of mankind. Jin-Woo must hear these pleas for help. Let their despair penetrate his heart and regret his choices. But after hearing everything, Jin-Woo replied, "It's so strange because I wanted to tell you the same thing. It should have been nearing the end of this battle." But the dagger that was in the air started to turn toward the Dragon King.